News 40's First at 5, coverage you can count on.
I'm Dave Matson.
And I'm Beth Carroll. Tonight, News 40 brings you a special program, 2001, a year to remember.
From political battles to the war against skunks, our reporters and photographers have been very busy documenting stories over the past 12 months.
During the next hour, we will look at the events that shaped this past year. We start with the event that changed all of our lives forever, the attack on America, Tuesday, September 11th. It was business as usual at Logan Airport on the morning of September 11th. Unsuspecting passengers boarded American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175 bound for Los Angeles. In New York City, the media networks led their morning newscasts with the Texas mother who was charged with drowning her children. Then around 8:45, there came word that it appeared that one of the Twin Towers in the city was on fire. Moments after, news choppers took to the skies, and this horrifying scene unfolded live on national television. A second jetliner crashed into the other World Trade Center tower as America watched. We would later learn the two planes were hijacked out of Boston's Logan Airport. The country was under attack. What was next? We didn't have to wait long to find out. At 9:30, American Flight 77, hijacked out of Washington, took aim at the Pentagon.
Thick black smoke billows from the National Defense Building. The West Wing of the White House is quickly evacuated, but the president is in Florida and is taken to an undisclosed location. Back in New York City, one of the country's most recognizable landmarks crumbles to the ground.
Never seen them black and white.
Trapped inside, firefighters, police, countless Americans, and citizens from all over the world. People walking to work run down the street for cover. At the same time, in the skies above a remote area of Pennsylvania, passengers on board United Flight 93 are trying to thwart yet another attack on America. Their mission is a success. The plane misses its target, crashing into Shanksville at 10:10. All 45 people on board are dead. 19 minutes later, more mayhem back in New York City as the second World Trade Center tower crumbles to the ground. Total time of destruction, just 1 hour, 49 minutes. Total lives lost, over 3,000.
On the streets of New York City, shock and disbelief. The bright lights of the Big Apple dulled by a haze of white dust.
Well, almost everyone knew someone involved in the terror attacks. People took to the streets, searching for loved ones.
News 40's Jim Polito made it to New York City right after the attack. Here's his account of what he saw at Ground Zero.
These are the images of 9/11 that will stick with me for the rest of my life. A shoe, maybe lost during a hasty retreat. A fruit stand covered in that white dust that fell like snow for blocks around Ground Zero, because even after crumbling, the buildings continued to burn. Then there was the constant stream of ambulances, which we quickly learned were carrying injured rescue workers, not victims from the tower. Have you seen anyone been pulled out alive since you've been here?
I haven't seen anyone pulled out alive yet. We haven't got inside.
That's Peter Coppola, a member of the Iron Workers Union that helped to build the towers back in the 60s. Now they're digging through the wreck in search of victims. Sadly, after the first 13 hours following the attack, there were no more survivors. Search dogs like Shannon found only remains.
I saw the elbow, and once she let me know that it was somebody in there, I stepped away, and they started excavating, and they put it in the bag. And
more stories like that one came out with the tired rescue workers who walked through our press village 2 blocks from Ground Zero. That's as close as photographer Luis Abad and I got. Considering what was going on inside, it was probably a blessing.
They were coming and still coming more and more, and they were bringing body bags in, and it was horrific.
Less than 24 hours after the attack, authorities began the manhunt for those responsible. Part of that search took place back home. My colleague Jerry Gretzinger picks up the story in Boston.
Everything started, unfortunately, here in Boston when the hijacked flights left out of Logan Airport today. The investigation seems to have been starting here. As you said, I am outside of the John Joseph Moakley Federal Courthouse, where we're told, that these are unconfirmed reports, that inside there is at least one man who they believe could be tied to yesterday's horrific tragedy that happened throughout the country. Now, earlier today, where that gentleman came from, 3 men were said to have been arrested at the Westin Hotel at Copley Square in the heart of Boston. It was right around 1 o'clock. Boston's SWAT team, state police, as well as heavily armed FBI agents went into the hotel.
I just hope that they get whoever is responsible for this and they execute them.
You're not scared right now?
No.
Authorities made the arrests based on credit card information. They determined the card used to rent the room was the same credit card used to purchase tickets for seats on the hijacked plane. After further investigation, the men were all released.
The families of victims were undoubtedly looking for swift justice of those responsible for the deadly attacks.
News 40's Susan Goodman recalls the victims from Western Mass.
8 of the 3,000 victims of the September 11th attacks were from Western Massachusetts. The hardest hit community, Westfield. 3 of its residents who grew up and attended the same high school would ironically perish together. 30-year-old Tara Creamer, a graduate of Westfield High School's class of 1989, moved to Worcester and took a job with the TJX company. She was on a business trip for them and was aboard American Airlines Flight 11. She leaves behind 2 daughters and a husband. Her father, former Westfield High Superintendent James Shea, says he will always treasure the time he had with her.
God gave me her 30 years ago. She's a great girl, and she's a great mother, and a great daughter. And I cherish the years that I've had as my daughter.
The plane Creamer was on crashed through the First Trade Tower, where 41-year-old Brian Murphy and Danny Trant were working. They were both on the 105th floor in the Cantor Fitzgerald offices. Brian had emailed his wife only 20 minutes before the crash. Danny Trant, a Westfield High School and college basketball star, called his wife in Long Island. He told her he was trapped inside and that he loved her. And most of the country will remember another phone call, this one made by West Springfield native Melissa Harrington Hughes. Television stations everywhere broadcasted her tearful goodbye left on the answering machine to her husband. She called her father next.
I wish we could turn the clock back to September 10th. We can't, and every day I just, we go on and I try to think about my daughter and all the pleasant things that memories she gave to us, not only as a family, but as a community, and just hope that something like this never happens again anywhere in the world. That's all. Pray to God that it never happen again.
60-year-old Nicholas Humber, formerly of Ludlow, was also a passenger on Flight 11. Employed by Enron Wind Company, Humber was on a business trip to Los Angeles. 24-year-old Jean Roger, a flight attendant and graduate of Longmeadow High School, was also aboard that flight. At this memorial service, her family and friends remembered her as a friendly and loving young woman. The University of Massachusetts lost an alum and professor. Jessica Sachs, who graduated last February, was on a business trip and was aboard Flight 11. 33-year-old Christopher Karstanian, a computer researcher, was on the second plane that crashed into the World Trade Center.
While Susan reminds us of the people we lost, there are some miraculous stories of survival and near misses.
Jim Polito joins us now to tell us about a Longmeadow man who had a close call. Jim?
Well, Dave and Beth, there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who lived in and around Ground Zero. And while reporting from the edge of Ground Zero, I was approached by one of those people. He walked up wearing shorts, a T-shirt, and Converse sneakers that were one size too small. At first, I thought he was a homeless person. Well, that assumption was not very far off the mark. His name is John Schreier, and he moved to New York from Longmeadow about 10 years ago. Those clothes and small bag were his only possessions. Schreier lived in Battery Park, just 2 blocks from the towers, and could not get back into his home. On 9/11, he left his apartment to take the subway to work from the station underneath the towers. He's usually there around 8:45, but luckily on that day, he left for work early. He watched from the roof of his office building as the second plane hit and both buildings crumbled. In the days following the attack, he slept on the floor of a friend's small apartment. Now, John was not allowed back inside his apartment until last month, and after spending one night there, he had to move out because of the air, which continues to cause coughing and irritation. It took a week for my voice to get back to normal after returning home. And by the way, photographer Louise Abad and I would not have made it back home without John Schreyer's help. On September 13th, we gave him a ride to his parents' home in Long Meadow. And Dave and Beth, without his directions, we would have never gotten out of Manhattan.
Jim, thanks very much.
All righty.
Another amazing story.
Yes.
For other families, the turmoil was just beginning.
Operation Enduring Freedom was implemented, and the nation was, for all intent and purposes, at war.
News 40's Catherine Shepardson has more on the people in Western Massachusetts who answered the call of duty.
They are the people of our everyday lives, teachers, doctors, store clerks, even factory workers. But now they are all wearing the same uniform, those of reservists.
Okay, you're good to go. Thank you.
Over 1,000 servicemen and women at military bases in Westfield and Chicopee have been called to active duty since 9/11, making Operation Enduring Freedom the largest local call-up since the days of Desert Storm.
We've been authorized to call people up for 12 months. The partial mobilization authority that came when the president declared the national emergency actually allows reservists to be called up for a total of 24 months. So this 12-month activation could be extended another 12 months.
In the Air Force Reserve, Gary flies a C-5. And like many of his comrades, being called to duty involves another battle.
Now catch it. Show them how you can catch it.
Leaving loved ones behind for the holidays.
This is one way that we can contribute and secure our country.
And it's that sentiment that comforts men and women as they leave their families behind, knowing they are doing their part to serve our country.
There's still more ahead when News 40's special coverage of 2001, a year to remember, continued.
It was the hottest race in Western Mass. When we return, a look back on the battle for the Springfield mayor's seat.
And it was a year for new faces and sad goodbyes. When a year to remember continues, a look back at the people of 2001.
News 40 reporters, unlike any others, they dig deep to cover stories in depth and up close. Whether it's local or national news, we'll be there. News 40, it's coverage you can count on. When severe winter weather strikes, don't get left out in the cold. Count on News 40's storm trackers to bring you the most up-to-the-minute accurate forecast. News 40 Storm Trackers. It's winter weather coverage you can count on.
We continue with a look back at some of the top criminal cases making headlines in 2001. From Kristen Gilbert and the controversial death penalty case to the execution of Timothy McVeigh, our court system was busy. News 40's Ray Herschel takes a look now at the court docket.
It was a federal case that drew attention far beyond the borders of Massachusetts, the case of former VA nurse Kristen Gilbert. On March 15th, Gilbert was found guilty of murdering 4 veterans under her care at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Leeds and attempting to murder 3 others. The case took on added drama since Gilbert faced a possible death sentence. The Springfield jury decided to spare her life, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I think I speak for all of us when I say shame on the government for trying to bring the death penalty back to Massachusetts, and praise to the jury for rejecting it.
Gilbert will spend the rest of her life in a federal prison in Texas. In another high-profile case, Eddie Morales was convicted in Hamden County Superior Court of murdering Holyoke police officer John DiNapoli. The murder of the popular police officer took a heavy toll on the community.
When Mr. Morales killed John, he killed a little bit of our community. And for that, he should pay the ultimate price.
He did, and Morales was sentenced to life in prison.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Fernando Perez, guilty.
In another case involving a police shooting, 18-year-old Fernando Perez was convicted of shooting Springfield police officer Carlo D'Amato during a botched robbery attempt. D'Amato has undergone several operations and has not yet returned to the police force. The Timothy Golan trial drew a lot of local attention. Not only was he convicted of attempting to kidnap a 20-year-old Munson woman, his name came up in the Molly Bish investigation when he reportedly mentioned Bish's name when stopped by a state trooper. To date, the Bish case remains unsolved. In Springfield, an 11-year-old boy was stabbed to death at a movie theater. Nestor Herrera died after being stabbed at the Regal Cinemas. His assailant was also 11 years old. On the national scene, the country was shocked to learn that Andrea Yates, a Texas mother, was charged with drowning her 5 young children. Under Texas law, she could face the death penalty. And in the most highly publicized capital case of the year, Timothy McVeigh was executed by lethal injection on June 11th for his role in the Oklahoma City bombing. Ray Herschel, News 40.
Accusations of another form of crime, public corruption, played a big part in the Springfield mayoral race. Mayor Michael Albano was elected to a 4th term, but not without a fierce battle from State Representative Paul Caron. With a look back at the 2001 vote, here's News 40's Jim Polito.
Last winter, when Mike Albano announced he was running for re-election, he surrounded himself with political heavyweights. He even captured the moment for a television commercial.
Very honored by the trust the citizens of Springfield have placed in me.
But on that day, when the mayor announced he was seeking a 4th term, a man who had endorsed Albano for his 1st term was nowhere to be found.
I think it's important that you be near to everyone, that this city hall not be viewed as the city hall of the few.
After nearly 20 years on Beacon Hill, State Representative Paul Caron wanted to come back home and move into City Hall. By taking out nomination papers in August, he set up a political battle royale, and Caron came out swinging. He jabbed at Albano and blamed him for the FBI's corruption probe in City Hall. Then came the Ross Perot charts and charges of financial mismanagement in City Hall. That set both sides swinging.
Gave this mayor record amounts of local aid that he could spend to help the city's financial position. The question is, where did all this money go?
There are irresponsible comments, and quite frankly, there are people that do not understand municipal government financing in this race.
That type of negative comment was an exception from Albano. His strategy mostly centered on asking voters if they were better off now than before, and then brushing off criticism from Caron, which became the hallmark of the challenger's campaign.
There's not one major finding against the city of Springfield.
Listen, the FBI is not the welcome wagon. You'd like to say that these are auditors just auditing books, but auditors come in with pencils and calculators. The FBI that are in town with subpoenas and wiretaps.
In the end, Albano won his 4th term with about 60% of the vote. Caron still has his state rep job, but both men's futures are still uncertain. The FBI probe continues, and Albano may have to deal with budget problems. Beacon Hill cuts back on local aid. And a proposed redistricting plan, also born on Beacon Hill, may force Paul Caron into another tough race. Next November, if he runs for re-election, Caron could face another state rep, Chris Aslan, because their 2 districts could be squeezed into one.
Political wranglings of a different kind for embattled Governor Jane Swift. The Williamstown native made history back in April, becoming the Bay State's first female governor. Undoubtedly, though, there are moments of 2001 the acting governor would like to forget. With more on the trials and tribulations of Swift's first 8 months is News 40's Lisa Daniels.
Jane Maria Swift on the 10th day of April 2001. Thank you for being at my side, and good luck leading our great Commonwealth.
What a year it's been for Jane. On April 10th, Swift became the state's first female governor at the age of 36. Pregnant with twins, the Williamstown native had no idea the turmoil that would plague the first months of her administration. 24 hours after taking the oath and issuing her first executive order, controversy started to swirl around Swift's pregnancy. Only a month after taking office, Swift was hospitalized after having contractions. The mother-to-be would be required to govern from her hospital bed until her delivery, a move that ruffled feathers on Beacon Hill. Eager to take control of the State House, the all-Democratic Governor's Council
petitioned the state's highest court to determine if it was constitutional for Swift to conduct official meetings by phone. In the end, a ruling came in Swift's favor. Then another victory. For the first time since taking office, the acting governor's approval rating skyrocketed from 17 to 40%. On May 15th, Swift shattered the record books again, becoming the first governor to give birth while in office. After taking Lauren and Sarah home to Williamstown, Swift continued to run the state from Western Mass. The honeymoon, however, was about to end. In August, skeletons started surfacing. First, her openly gay stepson came out of the closet, calling Swift a hypocrite for trying to secure votes within the gay community by enacting legislation she did not believe in. Then there was the white lie.
Here to sometimes reevaluate decisions in hindsight, that's for sure.
Swift's marriage came under fire after she and her husband Chuck admitted to lying on their marriage certificate. The couple said Chuck had only been married once before, but Jane was his fourth wife. Swift argued she was protecting her husband's privacy. The couple was fined $200. Then the horrific events of 9/11. From right under Swift's nose, two of the planes that crashed into the Twin Towers were hijacked amid lax security at Logan Airport. Then a month later, there was the matter of the state's sagging economy.
We have savings totaling $4.5 billion. This is a storm we have been preparing to weather for 10 years.
A very polished and put-together Jane Swift delivered her first televised speech, trying to reassure her constituents the state was economically strong. Her new visibility and how she handled the crisis sent the approval rating soaring to 66%.
Made the decision to run to win. That is part of who I am. I'm a pretty competitive person, and so
2002 will see more challenges. The new year could pit the two top women of Western Mass against each other if State Treasurer Shannon O'Brien runs for governor. And a re-election certainly is not guaranteed. Two new polls this past month revealed that Swift's popularity dropped to 48%. It very well could be attributed to her most recent controversies. There was the outrageous severance package for outgoing Massport Executive Director Virginia Buckingham. The Turnpike turmoil, in which the state's highest court ruled that Swift could fire two members of the Turnpike Authority over what she called fiscal irresponsibility. And the budget showdown between Swift and the state's lawmakers. Calling a 5-month overdue budget plan a mess, Swift made good on threats to cut $270 million. Lawmakers, however, restored over half of the governor's budget vetoes. But don't count Jane out, as 2001 proved the underdog can come out on top.
It was a tough year for the Bay State's economy. The year started off with a round of store closures. The events of 9/11 only added to the economic downturn and caused the fall of the stock market. A look now at the year's record highs and lows. The recession didn't become official until November, but the signs were there as far back as March. Pink slips everywhere. In mid-February, Yankee Candle cut 275 jobs in South Deerfield. Friendly shaved 100 workers from its payroll in Wilbraham in October. Even Mass Mutual was hit, eliminating 112 insurance jobs in November. And when Smith & Wesson got a new owner in May, workers got job notices.
Unfortunately, there'll be a few more layoffs this week as we make the company the right size operationally and structure-wise for the business levels that we're currently experiencing.
The gunmaker's new owner, Safety Hammer, didn't see its first profit until November. Retailers also fell victim to the slowing economy. Bradley's shuttered its doors in February, leaving still more people out of work.
See, I think we're still in the state of shock.
Ames closed 47 stores before filing for bankruptcy protection in August. And after 27 years in Chicopee, the Fairfield Mall became history.
We knew something was going on. They weren't filling any new stores in here. We were hoping that somebody big was going to take the Caldor store and then kind of revitalize the mall.
The bargain store Spags, which came to Springfield amid much fanfare, quickly departed. In December, an auctioneer took bids on remaining items as Servview stores in Enfield and Northampton hit the end of the road. It was a roller coaster ride at the pumps. In May, gas prices soared to all-time highs at $1.75 for regular unleaded. Just last month at A&H in Chicopee, that same gas was selling for 99 cents a gallon. And it was a banner year for home sales, with the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates 11 times. Mortgage rates hit historic lows, and sales saw record highs. Wall Street is known for its volatility. When the economy went from bad to worse after the 9/11 attacks, so did the financial markets. But by year's end, analysts touted the return of the bull market, amid signs that the worst of the economic downturn was over.
Plane crashes, school violence, FBI probes. The year was filled with news events here in Western Mass.
Here's a look now at some of the other headlines of 2001. Vincent Canavan, the man federal prosecutors say was the muscle behind the local mob's gambling and loan sharking operations, was arrested in June. He was released on bail after his arraignment on federal charges. Wiretap conversations painted him as a man who used violence to collect debts for the local branch of the Genovese crime family. Canavan worked as a bartender at the Civic Pub, along with others who were charged in the federal crackdown. The investigation led to a building across the street from the pub, City Hall. FBI agents seized files from several city departments after their gaming investigation led them to alleged links of possible corruption in city government.
It's my experience out here in Western Massachusetts. The public has been so supportive, and really we have so many tips and so many leads coming in from the public that, you know, may pan out to be nothing or may eventually lead to something.
There have not been any arrests in the FBI's public corruption probe, but the gaming crackdown widened when the feds tipped off Bay State law enforcement to illegal video poker and slot machines.
We're talking about a multi-million-dollar operation here in Western Massachusetts.
Over 100 machines were pulled from 60 local bars and restaurants. Prosecutors say the establishments hosting the machines would split the profits of the machine's owner, S&M Vending, a company owned by reputed mobster Albert Baba Shabeli. Shabeli is already facing a federal indictment in connection with the FBI crackdown, but has not been charged by the state. 2 of the 100 gaming machines owned by Shabeli were taken from the Civic Pub.
He was described as dedicated and caring. 51-year-old school counselor, the Reverend Theodore Brown. Reverend Brown was stabbed to death on December 5th at Springfield High School, an alternative school.
This is a tragedy beyond any dimensions that I am familiar with. We will deal with it, and we will deal with it in a professional fashion.
17-year-old Corey Ramos was arrested and charged with the stabbing. Authorities say the incident was triggered by an argument over Ramos wearing a hooded sweatshirt to school. The Reverend Brown touched many lives as a family relations specialist. An overflow crowd of family, friends, and colleagues attended his funeral at Holy Family Church in Springfield.
This is a man that had real deep dedication to kids, and he really wanted to do whatever it would take to help these young people get through school.
He had a spirit like you will never forget. He was like a man of God. Everything he said was true, and he always tried to comfort you when you was down.
The weapon used in Reverend Brown's stabbing death was described as a trench knife with a 4-inch blade and brass knuckles type of handle. As a result of the stabbing incident, the Springfield School Committee quickly moved to beef up security, including the installation of metal detectors at the city's 4 alternative high schools.
Western Massachusetts lost a kind and well-respected member of its medical community last year in a freak plane accident. Dr. Munir Abbasi, a neurosurgeon from Longmeadow, died from injuries suffered when the small plane he was piloting crashed near Barnes Airport in Westfield.
We miss him as a friend, as a humanist, as a physician, as an integral part of the society.
Friends and colleagues describe Dr. Abbasi as one of a kind.
You don't really make sense of it, especially when a death is so sudden and awful. It's the time that you really draw on your faith, and I think the gathering today will be a good example of that.
Members of all faiths came together at a memorial service at the Islamic Center. They said it was a loss for the entire community.
It seems, although we are celebrating his death, all of us are going to go away remembering how full of life he was and how much he gave to each of us.
It was a year to welcome new faces and say goodbye to some old friends. While some city leaders began new jobs, the political world lost some lifelong servants. We continue now with a look at the many faces of 2001.
What's the clear message you want to give them today?
We're going to rock their world. And that's exactly what Anthony Scott has done ever since he became Holyoke's police chief back in the spring. He's led his department in an assault on crime, letting criminals know they no longer control the streets of Holyoke. He's rocked the world of crime and the judicial system, too, locking horns with local judges who've released many of the accused criminals rounded up in Scott's crime sweeps. Anthony Scott making his mark on law enforcement in Holyoke and in Western Massachusetts. A changing of the guard at the Springfield School Department. After more than a decade at the helm, Superintendent Peter Negroni left to take a job in New York City. His replacement, this man, Joseph Burke. Burke spearheaded changes in the Miami, Florida school system. He wants to implement many of those same changes in Springfield, including eliminating lower-level courses and increasing requirements for graduation. His first big challenge, questions of security at Springfield schools after the stabbing death in December of a counselor by a student. For 13 years, Angel Hernandez dreamed he'd be able to walk out of the door whenever he wanted, read wherever he chose, and see his son every day. It happened on the 15th of August when he was released from prison after DNA testing exonerated him of a rape he was convicted of committing in 1988. He spent his time out of prison rebuilding his relationship with his mom and 13-year-old son, as well as rebuilding his life. We first learned of John and Maggie Bish in late June of 2000, when their daughter Molly disappeared from her job as a lifeguard in the town of Warren. Not only have the Bishes kept Molly's name in case before the local media, they've also taken her story nationwide. The Bishes have appeared on Good Morning America, Sally, Maury Povich, and numerous other TV shows, as well as telling their story to People magazine. In 2001, the Bishes have turned the tragedy of their missing daughter into a crusade to keep children safe from harm all across the country. We were inspired by countless people in 2001. We got to know him first as a ray of Elvis, but since July, we've come to know him as a man of incredible courage. Ray Gilmet Jr. has entertained thousands, but in July, he nearly lost his life when the motorcycle he was driving was rear-ended by an habitual drunk driver. Gilmet and his girlfriend were thrown from the bike. She suffered relatively minor injuries. He suffered severe head and leg injuries. In fact, his leg had to be amputated. He's not let that get him down, though. As Ray continues his rehabilitation, he vows to be back on stage soon. 95-year-old Sister Mary Richard. Every morning, she waters her plants, checks her email, and goes to Mass. And she's voted in every election, national, state, and local, since 1928. That's more than 100 elections. And that's one of the reasons she's an inspiration to all of us. We still don't know her name, but a newborn baby girl captured all of our attention in September. She was abandoned in the back of St. Catherine's Church in Springfield. Discovered by a woman in church on a Saturday morning to pray, only to be startled by a baby's cries. The baby, now 4 months old, is in foster care. Up to now, her mother has not been found. He quietly served his country as an Army Green Beret until a December day when he was killed by friendly fire while fighting in Afghanistan. At that time, Daniel Pettitori rose to national prominence as one of the first casualties in the War on Terror. At home in Cheshire, Daniel is remembered as a playful young man with a serious side and an overriding ambition to serve his country. His family turned down an offer to have Daniel buried with other heroes in Arlington National Cemetery, instead opting to bring Daniel home one last time, to be buried in the town in which he grew up and loved so much. We said goodbye to some other longtime friends in 2001. He reported on the weather in Springfield for nearly 50 years, and all for one TV station. John Quill died in June. He was truly one of a kind. John never gave a forecast he couldn't stand behind, truly dedicated to his profession, and most importantly, to his viewers. A true man of the people, Congressman Joe Moakley lost his battle with leukemia on Memorial Day. Moakley grew up in South Boston and never forgot his roots. Nor did longtime Springfield Congressman Edward Boland, who died the Sunday before Election Day. He was first elected to Congress in 1952 and never looked back, retiring in 1988 after 18 consecutive terms. In fact, Ed Boland never lost any election. Boland retired quietly from public life to devote his time and energy to his family.
There was just nobody like him, and there'll never be another one like him. He was the most compassionate, kind, and decent guy that you would ever want to meet in your life. He was completely sympathetic and understanding of the problem of the people that he sprung from. And he never forgot them, and they never forgot him.
Ed Bolden was 90. There were, of course, other notable passings and new faces in 2001, but a few in particular stand out. The death of George Harrison felt like it was a personal loss to a generation who grew up listening to his music and that of the Beatles. And Chandra Levy became a household name no matter where you lived this year. We will apparently still be talking about her unsolved disappearance in the new year.
There are some other faces the world is now lost without. The most memorable in the sporting world, racing legend Dale Earnhardt. A look back on his career and the rest of the year in sports coming up.
And it was a wild and wacky year in the weather world. The highs and lows of 2001, when News 40's A Year to Remember returns.
Catch the UMass Basketball Show with Coach Steve Laffis, Sunday afternoons and Sunday evenings after the nightcast, only on News 40. Sports coverage you can count on.
Despite the tragic events of September 11th, the year wasn't all bad. In fact, there were actually some moments you could sit back and laugh at. News 40's Jerry Gretzinger takes a look at the lighter side of 2001.
The lighter side of the news started with an enlightening story in January. Springfield fourth grader Patrick Elliott rewarded after single-handedly extinguishing a kitchen fire. Are you going to be a firefighter someday?
Yep, I hope to.
A regular chip off the old block, Patrick's father is a firefighter. Western Mass residents geared up for Groundhog Day, even those that couldn't come up with the name Punxsutawney Phil.
Something knob.
Something what?
Knob.
Something knob? Jim. Jim?
Yeah.
There's no Groundhog's named Jim, I don't think.
No, probably not.
Whatever you call him, he saw his shadow forecasting 6 more weeks of winter. Also in February, we met some of the Bay State's world record holders, the Chicopee Dairy Queen for the largest blended soft-serve dessert, and Arlington, Paul Tavilla, for distance grape catching. His current record, 788 feet from the top of the John Hancock Building. In March, temperatures started to rise and folks were getting ready for spring, although some tried to ride winter out a little longer.
Are you all right?
April 6th brought about the annual Mecca to Fenway Park as Red Sox fans decked themselves out in full regalia for the home opener.
Red Sox suspenders, a Red Sox sweatshirt, a Red Sox hat, and you have, what else do you have?
Red Sox thong.
Woo! That's a fan. We're going all the way this year, baby. All the way.
Of course, the Sox finished the season in 2nd place. Seeing baseball in action got Blandford folks hot under the collar. It was mid-March, and they still had several feet of snow on the ground.
Is it pretty to look at least?
No, not anymore. It was in the beginning of the year, but now we want it gone.
Massachusetts celebrated Patriots Day on April 16th. Few people could tell us what was being celebrated.
Hey, do you know what today is? It's Patriots Day. Yep. Do you know what Patriots Day is all about? No. Do you know what the Minutemen are?
Yes.
Who?
The UMass Minutemen basketball.
Well, she's not wrong. But hey, the timing was right for a pair of baby eagles to be banded in May near their nest in West Springfield.
And he's going to be going right through these grapevines.
Fisheries and wildlife officials expected 20 new eagles to take flight this year.
I'm trying to do the Taste of Springfield with my Weight Watchers points here.
There were a few delicious days in June as the Peter Pan taste tempted us and taught some a hard lesson about fat and calories.
Do you have anything here that might be low in points?
That's the thing.
You got something?
Something.
What is it? What is it?
Water?
Water?
Also in June, Red Sox fans had a new hero.
He rips one high and deep to left, and what a way to start his Red Sox career at home. A line
No, not Manny Ramirez, Paul Giorgio, a mountain climber who scaled Mount Everest with the intent of defeating the curse of the Bambino. He even enlisted the help of the Lama, a Tibetan Buddhist holy man.
I explained to him the problem with the curse and stuff like that. And the Red Sox have won a championship since 1918, and can I, if I put the cap on the summit and get it blessed, would that work? And that's what he suggested to do.
Even though the Sox did not go
all the way this year, baby,
Giorgio got some satisfaction. His instructions included burning a Yankee cap. At the end of June, the heat was on. Springfield area vacationers packed their bags for Hampton Beach. New Hampshire hotels and motels, the happy antidotes for cabin fever.
Logged up over 7,000 miles on the vegetable oil.
In July, Justin Carvin showed off his grease car, a vehicle with a diesel engine modified to run on cooking oil, salad oil, even a restaurant's waste oil. Turns out Batman is socially aware. An inside look at the stunt show at Six Flags New England revealed this interesting fact about the Cape Crusaders car.
The Batmobile is actually electrical. They have to get that prepared actually overnight.
They charge it?
They charge it overnight.
Hollywood fever was flooding the aisles of the Big Y supermarket in Springfield in August. A Steven Seagal lookalike had shoppers seeing stars.
What did you call him?
Steven Seagal.
Why did you say that?
Well, look at him.
How do you feel working with a star every day?
Oh, I feel really good.
Yeah?
Wouldn't you? You know, if you were a female?
In September, Western Massachusetts and the country as a whole had very little to laugh about, and there was no lighter side. Rightly so, we were all preoccupied with the events of 9/11. Late-night talk shows were suddenly discussing the issues at hand. The Emmys were postponed, and local radio DJs quit their wisecracking.
Who in their right minds feels comfortable making an offhand comment about this?
Rock 102's Baxton O'Brien, like the rest of us, got serious, but also got back to some semblance of normalcy before long. Thanksgiving got the holiday season rolling, and on the biggest shopping day of the year, jolly old St. Nick himself had this advice for parents. Take your kids to the food court after they've seen Santa.
But I have had a child throw up on me.
Oh.
Many times.
Oh,
they get so nervous, and the parents have got them so nervous by bringing them down, and all of a sudden, there it is.
Yep, there had been a skunk.
Finally, in December, there was quite a stink in West Springfield as unusually warm weather brought skunks out in full force, which wreaked havoc for business and homeowners. But like so many other stories from the lighter side, this one turned out all right in the end.
It was a year of memorable moments in the world of sports. News 40 Sports Director Scott Cohen joins us now with a look back at 2001. Scott?
Okay, Dave, thanks very much. It was a year in which the Yankees lost the World Series for a change. A basketball legend returned to the court, and unfortunately, the life of a racing legend came to an abrupt end. Here's a look back at the arrivals and departures of 2001.
And over end kick. The 2001 sports scene began with a dreary and disappointing winter and spring as the Patriots, Celtics, UMass basketball team, and the Bruins all missed the playoffs.
His right leg.
Those tough seasons brought changes, including locally the forced departure and arrival of two big-time college basketball coaches. Bruiser Flint moved to Philadelphia to coach Drexel. UMass's new coach moved from Philly to Amherst as Steve Lapis assumed control of the Minuteman program.
I left Villanova because it was time for a change for me, my family, and not just somewhere else, but somewhere like this.
Mediocre seasons by our local teams last spring paled in comparison to the magnitude of the death of racing legend Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt's death not only rocked the racing world, it also forced NASCAR to reconsider the safety of the sport. Dale's accident will be felt on and off the track for years to come. It was a big year for the local high schoolers, too. A handful of kids joined the 1,000 Career Point Club, the benchmark for star status on the high school basketball courts of Western Massachusetts. And it was a big year for high school football teams in our area. The Central Golden Eagles sent longtime coach Dan McLaughlin into retirement with another Super Bowl title. Central led the way, Super, one more time.
That I'm proud to be an American.
Like like the rest of the country, sports took a back seat after September 11th. A week later, the teams returned and served as a welcome diversion amidst the world's events. Patriotism filled stadiums across the nation, including right here in Western Mass. And maybe the biggest sports story in New England occurred late, December 20th, Christmas coming early for John Henry and Tom Werner, the new owners of the Boston Red Sox. 2001 ends on a much more positive note than it began. The Celtics, Bruins, and UMass have all flourished under new coaches, and the Patriots have a shot at a Super Bowl. The Red Sox, of course, well, they remain quite the mystery. But the way things look at year's end, 2002 may bring a long-awaited championship to Massachusetts.
The New England Patriots across the 30, 35, 40, and there he goes.
So the Patriots end 2001 on an up note, and they, of course, are the big surprise so far. But, Dave, we'll have to wait and see what kind of surprises they have for 2002 for themselves and all the fair weather fans.
Let's hope there's a lot left, Scott.
Let's hope so.
Thanks.
And speaking of weather, all you have to do is look outside to know it has been a wild year in the weather department. From golfing days before Christmas to shoveling spring snow in March, it's been a wacky year. With a look at the record highs and lows of 2001, our News 40 meteorologists Tom Bavacqua and Jason Russell.
You know, as we get close to the new year, just hours away, we are talking about the year 2001 and the top 5 weather stories.
And these, of course, were compiled and consensus results. But, you know, when we were looking at 2001, it was really a year of extremes, wasn't it?
That's right, and that's why he has the record book there.
That's right. This record book got quite a workout this year, Tom. As a matter of fact, we had 28 new records set this year, 19 record highs, and 9 record lows.
And, you know, and I didn't know that it was that extensive until we went back and looked up all the records. Quite amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And look at the temperature differences. Our warmest day was 97 degrees twice this summer, and the coldest day was January 3rd, 5 below zero. So this is really an area that we can have all sorts of weather extremes.
And that first 90-degree day, April.
I know, very, very early for 90 degrees. But you take a look at all the extremes, and the year averaged out very close to normal. As a matter of fact, our temperatures were only 1 degree above normal, which isn't that bad. Precipitation, rain and snow melted 2 inches below normal, and we averaged about a foot above normal snowfall, which I know makes you smile. As a snow lover, me too.
Absolutely, and you know, you mentioned something very interesting. You know, all these extremes, but in the means, the temperatures were really not that far apart. Mother Nature, the great equalizer.
Yeah, she certainly is. Let's jump on into the top 5 weather stories of the year, and the first one was actually this spring, and it was because of all the heavy snow that we got.
That's right, you better believe it.
You can see we had a lot of river flooding during the course of March into the early part of April, and this was a ticking time bomb that thankfully did not go off. We had a very cool spring, and that allowed for a tempered snow melt, and that was certainly good news.
And all the reports of how terrible the flooding could be if we had rains coming in with mild temperatures simultaneously, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, and that was certainly a blessing because it could have been much worse, and it might have been actually higher on our list of top 5 storms.
That's right, that 556 inches of snow at Jay Peak in northern Vermont had to go somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and very slowly it moved down the Connecticut River. Our number 4 is actually the opposite of flooding. Very, very dry weather over the course of the fall led to drought conditions this fall, and a lot of brush fires as well.
A lot of brush fires, and some of those brush fires very serious, occurring over portions of the Belchertown area, the Granby area too.
Also the Mount Tom fire, which claimed several hundred acres of land there. But the big thing that's amazing, going to the record books, November, the driest November on record. So if we don't get big snow this winter, Tom, we could be looking at severe drought for 2002. So we may revisit this next year when we're standing here talking about 2002.
You know, it's quite amazing how dry it did turn out. We just couldn't squeeze a drop of rain out of the clouds, some of which were few and far between.
But that was not the case as we headed on into the winter of this past year. The number 3, the heat waves of the summer. We had several 3 plus days in a row, 90 degrees.
That's right. That's what constitutes a heat wave, 3 in a row above 90.
And actually, the warmest temperatures were 97 degrees. And you remember the August heat wave where temperatures were in the upper 90s, even some towns in southern New England crested over 100 degrees. That sun was sweltering.
That's right. Not only was the sun blazing, but we also had high humidity to go along with it, and that heat index was very high at some points.
Of course, I was very fortunate to be vacationing in the UK during this, so I missed
Oh, how wonderful, with the nice sea breezes and temperatures in the 70s. Beautiful.
All right, Tom, all right, you and I, everyone knows that we're snow lovers, so let's get to the top 2 weather events of the year. This storm, I'll let you introduce this one.
Okay, this storm was really quite amazing because we call it by the foot because prior to the event, there could have been anywhere from 1 foot to 2 feet to 3 feet plus with this particular storm. The computer models were all over the place with this.
People thought we were nuts when we were saying 1 to 2 to possibly 3 feet of snow. Listen to some of these snowfall totals with this storm in March, which, by the way, ranked number 16 on our all-time snow list. West Springfield, 15 inches. Westfield, 14. Northampton had a foot. Leverett, the jackpot, 22 inches of snow. Actually, I think 1 or 2 towns might have even come in with a little bit more. Greenfield, your hometown, 19 inches of snow.
That's right, and it just came down and down and down, and sometimes at the rate of 3 to even 4 inches an hour, especially near the Vermont border, where places like Bernardson had almost 3 feet of snow.
And speaking of 3 feet of snow, that leads us to the number 1 weather event of the year, and something that we would probably not see again anytime soon. A very short duration storm, a hard-hitting storm, the 11-hour storm.
That's right. Unbelievable. This one, our storm trackers kept calling in and writing in, emailing us in. Tom, we now have 15 inches, 18 inches, 20 inches. Unbelievable for this particular amount of time.
Parts of southern New England were buried with over 30 inches of snow, and again, it fell within 11 hours. I hate to admit this, but I got stranded at home. I couldn't get out of my driveway. Tom, you were here all night, weren't you?
I was here all night and just waiting in great anticipation to head back up north to see how bad it was up to the north, and it really was terrible.
Don't feel sorry for this guy because you loved every minute of it. Some of the snowfall totals, 30 inches in Beckett, Leverett, 20 inches, 16 inches in Northampton. And we had the 3rd most snow out of one storm in Springfield, and that was at 19.4 inches.
Quick question. 2002, what do you think?
I like what I'm looking at for the month of January into early February. I think we're going to be looking at normal to above normal snow.
Okay, so Dave and Beth, if you like snow, if you like cold, you might want to stick around. If you like heat waves, well, you know, it's a little bit in the distance, but we'll just have to wait and see. Everybody, a Happy New Year.
Now that we've recapped the year, let's take a look at the future. What lies ahead?
The terrorist attacks of September 11th have changed the way Americans live forever. A sense of security has been replaced with vulnerability.
What you can be sure we'll see more of is increased security in our everyday lives.
News 40's Allison Maloney takes a look at what measures we can expect in the year ahead.
On September 11th, the way Americans traveled changed forever. At airports across the country, the FAA has increased security to the highest level. At Bradley International Airport, National Guards are patrolling terminals with the help of state police officers. All passengers have to show a picture ID, which is checked not only once, but sometimes twice. And it's not uncommon to see random carry-on bags being searched.
There are different processes of baggage searches that are being conducted, both carry-on and checked bags. And from this point forward, it really becomes a matter that is in the hands of the airlines.
As far as ground transportation goes, security has increased only slightly. Buying a ticket on an Amtrak train is no longer allowed. If passengers are purchasing them at the ticket counter, they must show picture identification. But there are ways around these ID checks. Passengers can still buy a boarding pass online or purchase one from these Quick-Trax machines found inside train stations. In both instances, identification is not verified. So what about once on board the train? Passengers we spoke to said not only were their IDs not checked, neither was their baggage. But implementing these new security measures means money, something the travel industry is lacking at the moment. A Senate committee voted to give the train service $1.8 billion to upgrade its security and service. Amtrak plans to use the money to fund resources needed to ensure all passenger IDs are properly checked. As far as air travel goes, Congress hopes a new airline security bill will make flying safer. The law requires all security screeners to become federal employees, calls for sky marshals to patrol planes, requires all checked luggage to be inspected, and will eventually lead to the installation of stronger cockpit doors on planes. Aside from these regulations, several airports could soon be installing the facial recognition system. The machine scans facial characteristics of all passengers and alerts security officials if they match suspected criminals in the database. Logan Airport is expected to get the technology soon, and Bradley is now looking into the device.
The recent fatal stabbing of a Springfield school counselor, coupled with the increasing violence in our schools, has prompted authorities to step up security. News 40's Jen Lemery's now with a look at security changes in our children's schools in the year ahead.
After the fatal stabbing of a beloved counselor, school officials scrambled to implement new security measures in Springfield schools. Right now, everyone entering Springfield High School, Bridge Academy, MCDI, and Springfield Academy have to pass through a metal detector like this one.
I think the superintendent at this point would like to be used every day until further notice.
7 city schools so far have been equipped with the walk-through metal detectors. Director of Springfield's school security, Peter Hogan, says, in addition, all middle and high school administrators have portable wands, which they use to check questionable students.
If they hear someone might be carrying some type of weapon, they'll ask for the wand, and the principal will go forward and to check the student.
There are a total of 53 cameras monitoring the halls and grounds of the Springfield High School. In a separate room, administrators monitor nearly all activity. Springfield High, along with all other middle and senior high schools, always have 2 police officers from the Quebec unit patrolling the halls. Hogan says most of these security measures are nothing new. He believes the city is doing everything they can to keep schools safe.
We've been doing locker searches, backpack searches, canine searches, student searches with the wands over the last 10 years.
And as time changes, so too will security measures in our children's schools.
While 2001 was a year overshadowed by tragedy, the year ended on some upbeat notes. 2002 looks to be a year filled with promising events and stories of inspiration. News 40's Beth Ward takes a look at 2002, the year ahead.
With the new year comes some new projects for the Western Massachusetts area. In Springfield, the newly constructed Basketball Hall of Fame is scheduled to open its doors this coming fall. The 80,000 square foot museum will feature historical, high-tech, and interactive exhibits and will include retail and restaurant components. The Hall of Fame project is just one portion of the multi-million-dollar riverfront development. Construction is already underway on the Hilton Garden Inn, a 140 guest room hotel slated to open in June. Uno Chicago Bar and Grill, another restaurant relocating to the riverfront, will be completed in May. Across the river in Agawam, Six Flags is looking to expand. The park is building a 120-foot roller coaster, but its name is under wraps. After months of tragic events, the year ends on an inspirational note and hopefully one that carries into 2002. Some Springfield postal workers took on the role of Santa's helpers, making Christmas merry for some children that may not have had much to smile about. Then there were the inspirational stories of 3 people from Western Massachusetts. Lisa Darlington of Westfield, Molly McGowan of Longmeadow, and Tom Bassett of Northampton were chosen to carry the Olympic torch through the streets of Connecticut. The trio was chosen because of the spirit they exude in overcoming the challenges in their everyday lives. And with the Olympic Games in Salt Lake City this February comes the renewed hope the world can be reunited again in peace. Beth Ward, News 40.
We hope 2002 is a year in which all of you get to fulfill your dreams and aspirations.
The events of September 11th changed all of our lives forever. We hope 2002 is a year filled with peace and prosperity. On behalf of all of us here at News 40, Happy New Year!
Beyond the headlines, beyond the surface, digging deep for all the facts. News 40 team coverage. It's the only local coverage you can count on.